G'day folks, welcome back to the channel. Today is another short video about, well, live worms. The end video, the video I shot at the end is we're fishing for whiting, but I've had a couple of questions lately and I even had a message with a little bit of information. Time poor, didn't want to go and dig worms, where was the best place to buy worms, and can you use worms for more than just whiting? And the answer is yes. It's a live bait that pretty much every fish eats, and it's the favourite bait for me. I like, you go Jew fishing and you put a really big bait down and it's worm, live worm, and you'll catch Jew. But you'll also catch just about anything else that swims past it. It's one of those baits that pretty much everything eats. That said, your estuary species, brim, whiting, flathead, and trevally, grunner, all of the standard common species you find in your local waterways, your rivers and estuaries, and even up close to the shallow reef and the bays. Everything that swims through there will eat worms. Well worth considering as your go-to bait. That's what this video is about. Before we get into the video, thank you very much for watching. If you get anything out of this video, make sure you give me the thumbs up. Just click that thumb just below. Subscribe to the channel because it really helps the channel the more people that are subscribed. And if you want to support the channel, the Patreon link below in the description. Hit that, follow the bouncing ball, and you can support the channel that way. Okay, bait fishing. Firstly, you can dig your own bait. It's very easy to dig worms, especially if you're around the peninsula in southeast Queensland. You just find that little shallow rock things, and I have got videos on it, so I'm not going to do it again now. And you can go and dig your own worms, and within a half hour you'll have enough worms there for a good solid session. The other alternative is to buy them. It's fine buying live worms. They're live worms. It just means it's money out of your pocket, that's all. Nearly every bait shop will have it. I use Tackle Land at Sandgate. Tackle Land at Sandgate they pretty much have live worms all the time. So get into Tackle Land, hit them up for some live worms, and you'll probably find between $8 and $16 you'll get enough worms for a really good solid session. Now that might sound a lot, but it can quite often be the difference between going fishing and going home with a feed and going fishing and just going home knowing that you had a good time and you didn't quite get a feed. Live worms almost guarantee you fish. Providing in the right time, the right tide, and you're chasing the right species, you'll get legal fish and you will be able to take them home for a feed. Absolutely 100% guarantee if you pick a rising tide in the summertime on top of a food source like a yabby bank or a place where worms are, and you throw out a live worm on a hook, you'll catch feed. Now, the gear you use. I personally like a 6-pound main line, and if I'm bait fishing I like a mono. I prefer mono. It doesn't matter if you've got braid, don't change it to mono. Braid's fine, but your leader's important. Your sinker above a swivel, and then your leader, 4-pound mono or 4-pound fluorocarbon. The fluorocarbon will probably work a little bit better than mono, so if you want to go out, and if you don't have it, don't buy it. All you need to use is a 4-pound mono. 4-pound mono down to a hook. Size of the hook depends on what you're chasing. If you're chasing whiting, and this time of year you'd be chasing whiting, a number 1 hook or a number 2 hook, long shank, and make sure you give a good solid account of a worm on that hook, so don't hold up short. You can use a medium shank or a short shank hook. It just means the fish, generally speaking, will swallow it and you'll have a lot more trouble getting the hook out of the fish. I prefer to use a long shank hook and put a little bit more worm on it. That way for the undersized fish it's way easier to release them unharmed. The type of hook I like are the True Turns and just the standard whiting hook you get from Mustard. That's the little bronze, and they work fine. One trick is, once you've caught 3 or 4 fish on one hook and you see the hook starting to discolour at the end, if you don't have a stone to sharpen it, get rid of the hook and put a new hook on. So only 3 or 4 fish per hook. You will catch more fish than that per hook, but you'll start missing them after 3 or 4 because you'll lose the edge on the tip. So a little trick, either replace the hook or sharpen the hook after your 3rd fish. Weight depends on the current. I'll use up to a 4 or a 5 ball. If I'm in the surf, I'll even use up to a 7 ball just to stop that sweep, but the lighter the better. If you're in an estuary system like Hayes or around the front of Scarborough or over at Banksia Beach or even Skirmish Point to some degree at a change of tide, and you don't have a lot of current, a lot of sweep, you can go right down to 2, 3 or 4 ball. You do need a bit of a sinker when you're using a trace to be able to cast that lightweight out, because a worm doesn't weigh very much. So a little bit of a sinker with a trace. The length of the trace is important. I like the nice soft whippy rods, so between a 9 and 11 foot rod depending on where I'm fishing, and quite a soft rod. Make sure if you're chasing whiting you let the whiting hook itself. You don't catch the whiting catches itself. So when you throw out and you feel that first bite and feel the nibble, if you've got a rod holder, put the goddamn rod in a rod holder and leave it alone until you see it bend. Once you see the bend in the rod, and if you've got enough faith in yourself to be able to hold that rod and wait for the bend, hold it. But if not, put it in a rod holder. You need the whiting to actually take the bait and start running away. When that happens, the rod will bend, a solid bend. You lift the rod, the hook sets, and you're on. Reel it in and repeat. So that's how I go about catching whiting, bream, tarwine, pretty much anything that swims our estuary systems with live worms. Stick around, and there's a video coming up catching a few whiting down at Banksia Beach. It's old footage, but it pretty much shows you the worms I use, shows you me putting them on the hook, talks about the trace that I just talked about. So have a look at that. If you got anything out of this video, make sure you hit that like button for me, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, Patreon link below to support the channel, and I'll catch you on the next video. Take care. You'll see here I've just pulled the worms out of the esky. I've got 2 little buckets of worms. This is the last part of this bucket. I'll put them in the sand there, and that'll be my bait for probably the next hour or so. I'm just cast out here. I'm casting out. It doesn't look like there's any structure here, but there's a ledge. You can see that dark water. Well, we've got a running tide right now, and it's fairly low, so I'm trying to get the bait just over the other side of that ledge. The gear I'm using today is a very light whiting rod. I've got a Stratic there, so I think it's a 1500 Stratic spool with 4-pound line. Hooks I like to use are the Mustard Vikings. They're probably my main hook. I also like the True Turns and also the Aberdeen Ultra Thins. The trace is probably the most important part of whiting fishing in my opinion. The longer the trace you can put on your rod that you can handle, the better. As a rule, I like to go 2/3 of the length of the rod, and you'll find you should be able to cast that fairly well. So really important to have a good long trace. The reason that is you don't want the whiting to feel that sinker. The lighter the sinker the better. I think I'm using a 3 ball here at the moment because the current just over that ledge is fairly strong. Now when you thread a worm on a hook, keep it simple. It's easy, just straight onto the hook. Expose the barb and you're ready to go. Now you can put it on 100 different ways. It'll work every way, but I can tell you now you don't get easier than this way, and it works. Nice and simple. Banksia Beach has got yabby banks all the way up it, and I'll tell you, you find the food source for the fish you're chasing and the fish won't be far away. So what the fish will be doing is sitting on this ledge just waiting for the tide to rise over these banks, and they'll come up and they'll hunt for yabbies. Another nice whiting here. This one goes 35 and a very good feed. I prefer the rising tide for my whiting fishing. However, you will catch them on any tide, whether it's rising, whether it's going out. All you need to do is find the food source or some structure, and you'll find. And when I say structure, you don't need much structure. All you need is a good ledge, so a good depth change, a bit of weed. Particularly important is the food source, and in this case we're on yabby banks. Yeah, that one there went just over 30.